Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. And with that, let's start the show. Welcome back to the Black Bibliophile, and welcome to another special episode. This special episode I decided to do on the fly after I read this book, which is the Steven Universe Art and Origins book, written by Chris McDonnell, forward by Rebecca Sugar, and introduction by Jenny Tarkankowski. So let's talk about it. Let's be about this book. So let's start from the beginning. I don't have a fancy summary. I don't have anything crazy in depth to talk about with this book, really about the history of it. So we're just going to talk about my love of Steven Universe. So I got this book as a gift from my friend John. He was like, oh, my publisher sent me these books, and I thought you'd like these two books. One was BoJack Horseman, and the other one was Steven Universe. And I was like, holy shit, give me those now. And so I read this whole book. I was having a really bad panic attack. I have really bad anxiety, and it's pretty bad. So I was having a really bad anxiety attack, and my partner, he was like, here, he put my headphones, my noise-canceling headphones on, turned on the Steven Universe playlist I have, which has both soundtracks, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and then handed me the Steven Universe art book, and he was like, just read that, listen to this music, and just breathe. Steven Universe, the show, is an animated show on Cartoon Network. I'm not sure when it started. I want to say, it's funny because this book tells you the art and origins of it, but I believe it started like 2010, I want to guess. 2011, about is like the inception of the show. It started, Rebecca Sugar created this show. It's about four crystal gems who live on Earth, and the fourth one being Steven. And he's a boy, he's half human, half crystal gem, and they are these genderless extraterrestrial beings that are super powered, but they are tasked to raising Steven, which is very great. And it's a very wholesome, cute family show that also delves into some deep dark subject matter. And I really, really think that it's a great show. So I've been watching it now for years, and it's one of the shows that I first started turning to when my panic attacks got really, really bad. Like, I would just binge watch all of it. And I know I first started watching Steven Universe when I had my second spine surgery, and it would really help me calm down, because when you have spine surgery, you can't get up, you can't really do anything. And I lived in a house that was 3 stories, so I was stuck at the very top in my bedroom, not being able to move. And Steven Universe was there to help me get through that really, really difficult time. So when I got this book, it again helped me through a massive panic attack. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never actually knew about what it took to bring this show together. And one part of the book I want to read you is the mythology of Steven Universe, because then it'll give you a feel for the show if you've never actually watched the show. So, the crystal gems were sent from another universe thousands of years ago to protect the human race. Their magic allows them to make an appearance of human teenagers, to pull powerful weapons from their universe into ours, to destroy and trap evil creatures, to collect and tame unstable magical objects, and to generally bend the metaphysical rules of this world. Steven Universe is a second-generation crystal gem. His mother, Rose Quartz, vanished like a phoenix when Steven inherited her gem. Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl adored Rose Quartz, so they have taken on the responsibility of raising her son. Sometimes Rose will visit Steven in his dreams and give him advice. When he wakes up, roses have grown all around his sleeping body, which he finds very embarrassing. So that part about rose quartz visiting him in his sleep, that doesn't happen. This is all like pre-show, but basically the gems live in a large woman-shaped temple full of dangerous magical objects and creatures. And the show is from Steven's point of view, and his point of view, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl are cool, awesome, and they do all sorts of crazy stuff he wants to do too. So basically, Steven is like a 10-year-old kid, and he's very curious about the world around him and about his life, and he is very cognizant of his gem being that of his mother's gem, rose quartz. In this book, Rebecca takes us through all the phases, not just Rebecca and the entire crew of the show. So the people who do art direction, the voice actors, production designers, everyone gives you the entire nitty-gritty of creating Steven Universe. So it goes from just character designs and different ideas to when Rebecca was in college, and how Steven Universe is actually based, the character Steven is based on her brother Steven Sugar, who is art director on the show. And it talks about their background in art and how their dad was a graphic designer and all of these dope things. And it goes in depth with all these in-depth interviews. And the book also has like all this really cool behind the scene notes. Like they would do a writing game where the writer's room would have a sketch, and from that sketch they'd have to create like a paragraph from that sketch, and each paragraph would have to be something to help carry on the story. And from that game, sometimes ideas for the show would come up and others were just fun. But the Steven Universe is like a 15-minute, 11-minute without commercial show. And they pack so much into this show. And I never knew how much it took to do animation and create something of this scale. Because Steven Universe now, I think it's like on its 6th season. They have, I don't know, probably about 100 episodes. And it's not something hard to hop into. Like if you have Hulu, I believe they have all the seasons up till now. And I believe every episode's about 11 minutes, but it feels like every episode could be an hour. That's how much information they pack into it, but it's like a seamless. Like you feel like, oh man, it's already over, but you've already learned so much. It's wild how they're able to do that, and the writers talk about balancing the comedy with the serious subjects that the show picks up later on in the seasons. And they talk about finding voice actors, and they talk about how the music is created, because every episode and every gem and every character has their own theme song, and it's based on shapes and colors and the stones they are and just their general personality. It's incredibly in depth, and you don't think about how much goes into a show like this, especially a kids show. You never think about, oh, they're spending hours and hours on just figuring out the look of the background. Like, for example, in the beginning of the book, they talk about the pilot episode and how they've created the pilot episode for Steven Universe. And it took them ages to get this together, for Rebecca to build the team and figure out how they want to present this pilot. And by the time they presented it and it was up there, and Cartoon Network was like, hey, let's make this a show, she was like, I want this. This isn't the final look of the show. We're starting from scratch. We're going to do this all over again. And before they were even able to premiere the show, like do the premiere episode, Cartoon Network leaked the pilot episode, freaking out everyone on Rebecca Sugar's team. And they were like, oh no, now people have expectations of what the show is going to look like, and it's completely different now. Like, it's kind of wild, because I never knew that story about the pilot until I read this book. And I actually never knew what the show looked like before they switched it up. And now it's has more pastel colors, and then the backgrounds are less realistic, and they simplified a lot of the look of the book, which is really, really interesting. Because when I'm looking at still shots of the pilot, everything was a little more quaint, the colors were a little darker, and it was cast more in reality, where Steven Universe the backgrounds are more simplistic and very, the word I want to say is like ethereal. There's more of a fantasy version to their backgrounds and less of a grounded in reality version. Beach City looks like an ideal paradise in a certain way, and especially their temple too. And it changes completely when the show is premiered. The gym's looks sort of say, for the most part, stay the same, except Pearl. Pearl comes off a little more jagged, a little more straight lace, and less pixie. She looks like a pixie in the beginning. And I think that's really interesting, but at the same time, I like that they showed you the evolution of the show. They showed you the art that Kevin Dart did, which really inspired the look of the backgrounds of the show. The show morphed into this thing that focuses on shapes and feeling and colors more than it does on how realistic the art can look. It has its own style, and I really enjoy that they dove into why they kind of stepped back from having a more realistic background and stepped back from having that typical kind of like, for example, BoJack Horseman, the backgrounds are kind of realistic looking, like you can see bricks and you can see the colors are more earthy. Where Steven Universe, they live in like these pastels and like these color spectrums that are kind of different from what you're usually seeing in a cartoon. And I like that they kind of made abstract shapes of backgrounds. Like, not everything looks like it should look. Like, nothing in your house will look like Steven Universe's house. Like, where they live under the giant gym temple is this crazy, beautiful place. And I just found it so interesting how the art direction changed from one thing to another, and how they explained it, and how they went into how the props of the show are created, and how the animation is done, how they do like the sketches and everything in Burbank, California at the Cartoon Network studios, but then they take it over to Korea to finish up and get the animation like nailed down. And like Rebecca flies there at least twice a year to meet with them and to talk with them about the show and about any changes, and just help them figure out a cohesive look for all the studios together. And I also dug that the show is very much like inspired by anime, like with the magical girl transformations and all that. They had Trigger come in, which is a famous animation studio in Japan. Trigger did an episode. I'm trying to find that part in the book, and I was like, what? He did, like, so Trigger Studios did Kill la Kill, they did Gurren Lagann, they have a new movie coming out, I do not know what it's called, but I really want to see it. I think they premiered it at Anime Expo this year. But yeah, they had Trigger Studios animate a segment of one of their episodes, and I was like, oh my gosh, these nerds are me. This is like a nerd animation thing. And I actually went back and rewatched that episode and like freaked out. And I like that there's a certain guide to how to draw Steven and all the characters, and that you can tell they keep, like, Steven has a heart-shaped face, and as long as he has that heart-shaped face and those like 5 bumps of hair, you know it's Steven, no matter who's drawing them. And you can tell different artists on different people. Like Rebecca Sugar's Steven is different than Ian's Steven is different than everybody else's Steven. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So I know I'm rambling on, so I'm gonna just sum it up, because this is an art book, so there isn't much like story to talk about, but it is very, very interesting and worth the money. It was, it is still worth the money, but this is a $30 art book, you guys, and it's jam-packed with all kinds of interesting factoids, has all the early post-it notes, down to interviews with everybody from the studio, from voice actors to sound designers to the musicians, and Rebecca herself, and Steven Sugar, and Rebecca's partner Ian. And it's so in depth, and it goes all the way back to her art school days in the inception of Steven Universe. I think it's really worth, if you're a fan of Steven Universe, like I'm a fan of Steven Universe, it's worth all the money. Like, I remember when this book came out and I was like, oh, this looks dope, but I'm gonna just keep watching the show. And I'm sad that I didn't pick it up sooner, because I've learned so much about this show that I would have never guessed went into making a show. And also, if you're into animation or into art, you should pick up this book, because this is a really good book to educate you on the animation process and just the general art process of creating a show or a character or character design. So yes, pick up Steven Universe Art and Origins. It is an amazing art book, and I definitely think everyone should read it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of me ranting. It's about 15-16 minutes of me talking about the Steven Universe book. If you guys have any other books you'd like me to do a focus quick episode on, you can email me at theblackbibliophile@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to help contribute to the podcast, you can become a patron on our Patreon, which I do book clubs. I put up special episodes and all kinds of fun stuff on there, like special episodes like this one, of course. And I also premiere episodes early. You get early access to all of my content there, and I write essays and fun things like that. Also, the podcast was just added to Apple Podcasts. So if you guys could go down there and leave a comic or review, tell me what you think about the podcast, that would truly help this podcast grow and be great. And I would love to just have it be great and be amazing. So thank you all for listening, and please pick up this book. It is gorgeous and truly worth the $30. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and yeah, talk to you later. See ya.